Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance will include Anna Delvey, Butterfly Murderers, and the Cult of Authenticity. All this as we explore Imposter Syndrome on Created Things.
Hello and welcome to Created Things, a podcast of Catholic creatives and the only podcast that has the courage to ask the question, what if the Velveteen Rabbit were actually full of crap? I'm your host, Father Gabriel Teretta, Dominican priest, burgeoning medievalist, human being 75% of the time. And with me is my co-host, Jacob Flores Popchak, human being 100% of the time, except when he's not. Artist, psychotherapist, person sitting in a chair. How are you?
You know, I'm human. I'm alive. I'm already at work in my head deconstructing frustratedly why you would have knocked the Velveteen Rabbit thing I keep bringing up in different episodes. But, you know, we'll get there. We'll get there together.
That's so beautiful. It makes you feel better. I completely forgot that you've ever mentioned the Velveteen Rabbit. Is that cool?
In like 3 or 4 episodes, I've talked about art Velveteen Rabbiting itself into the thing that it says it is.
Now that you say it, that rings a bell.
We talked about that in the Christmas episode, like kitschy Christmas ornaments not having any value, but then over time being loved into having value. We talked about, I think, the town of Santa Fe being like fake. We might have talked about that off air, but like Santa Fe was sort of in New Mexico was constructed totally falsely to sort of look like a stereotypical Mexican town, but actually didn't exist, but now has become an actual vibrant, you know, interracial, interethnic, super eclectic town. So yeah, I talk about the Velveteen Rabbit effect in art all the time, and you just open by unconsciously dissing me, my guy.
I did,
what
yeah,
the heck?
I did, yeah. No,
why
that's
you gotta
good.
Hate? Why you gotta be so hostile?
Yeah, well, because I figure like we gotta open somehow, and why not open with subconscious but real hostility, you know, like why not? You've got to open somehow. This is amazing. It's like an old married couple that'd be like, honey, like, oh, this is incredible. I hate this food. I've never had it before. Honey, we've had it every Tuesday since we've been married for 50 years. It's like, well, I hate it. It's the worst. You said you loved it yesterday. I hate it.
Yeah, that does actually describe our relationship a little bit.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. The only question is that like we're switching back and forth, like which one of us is the necky wife and which one of us is the like forgetful, neglectful husband. It's good, yeah.
I think the difference is that I like to start off confusing and work up to a mic drop, and you like to start with a mic drop that sort of alienates everyone, and then you like re-ingratiate people afterwards.
Yeah,
this is actually a device that you use even in homiletics, I've noticed, where you will just start off trying to offend as many people as you can, and then you will bring them back in again.
Oh, that's I don't funny. Know if I do actually do. I do
doing that.
I do know that I do that. It's not intentional. I don't think of it in my head as like I'm trying to offend you. I think of it in my head as like there are a lot of ways of being wrong that are very popular, and most of the people in this room probably have most of them, and I'm going to say how they're all dumb, and then we're going to go from there, which I find to be welcoming. I dare I say affirming.
Wow. I don't know if I would dare say that, but I love you, so I'm going to look the other way on it.
That's right. That's because real love means lying to each other.
Kinda on air while people are listening. Yeah,
that's right. Good. Yeah, good. And then like explosions in secret. This is good. This is, by the way, like, you know, gentle listener, if you signed on to this because you wanted arts and beauty, I tell you right now, we are giving you for free passive aggressive marriage advice.
Yeah, just real sort of like femme toxicity, throwing a lot of that in there because that's our brand.
Yeah, you know. Exactly. Like, are you or have you ever thought about buying a shirt that says may contain wine? Because I think maybe you should. That's all I'm saying. It's life. This is life.
It's wine o'clock somewhere.
It's wine o'clock.
What are we talking about? Why are we talking about this? I don't know why we're talking about
I don't
this.
really know. I'm about to get distracted by talking about wine merch, but I'm not going to, even though it's a whole mood. We could do a whole thing on wine merch because that's passionate. I have a passion about that.
Yeah, we should do wine kitsch as an episode.
Yeah.
We were just saying off air for those of you who weren't with us off air, which
sad.
is all of you.
Is that anybody?
We were just saying, well, I mean, our guardian angels. I was saying, I'm looking forward to, we were coming up with some other topics for future episodes, and no spoilers, but I was saying I'm looking forward to making these episodes incrementally more toxic as we go. And I think this is really a turning point. I think this episode the conversation so far is showing that that's the direction this is going for sure.
That's beautiful. Exactly right. This is a beautiful moment. Well, listen, I started with all that because today I want to talk about the question, am I real?
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you were doing peyote in the desert?
Yes. Possibly I can neither confirm nor deny, and I don't live near any deserts. So I can neither confirm nor deny. But
weren't you just in Utah at time of last recording?
Technically speaking, yes.
So
no comment.
I don't know that you have a leg to stand on.
Technically speaking, no comment. So, as I was saying, the question is, am I real? Right? And this is an arts and beauty podcast. It's always a big question, I think, for artists. The
question of whether I exist or not is a question for artists.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that because the question is, am I a real artist? Am I really as good as I think I am? Am I really as good as people say that I am? If other people say that you're good.
Okay. That makes sense. I thought you meant in sort of do I exist kind of Kant sort of a way.
Guys,
but you're talking about more questions of identity. I can dig that.
We're gonna crawl. We're gonna crawl inside a warm little cabinet. And we're going to ask, and we're going to phenomenologically bracket everything that we've ever known, and we're going to prove to ourselves by thought alone that we exist. At first when you said the cabinet thing, I thought you were making a Kafka's Metamorphosis thing. I thought you were confusing Kafka and Kant for a second. You were like, we're going to be little cockroaches and crawl into a cabinet and take a nap. So good.
But then you hadn't confused it. And
this is what Descartes did. Like Descartes, like, I guess he was cold. And he literally crawled inside what's basically kind of like a stove, kind of like a room stove, and like that's where he did his thinking for his big work, where he comes up where he ultimately just thinks that he can prove the objectivity of his own existence by this claim, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, which has all kinds of problems. But this is the idea that he crawls inside the cabinet, he never comes out again.
There was a saint, I forget, when I was doing my confirmation prep, there was some girl in the class whose name I also forget, who chose as her confirmation saint some like little known medieval saint who would put her head in an oven to hide from the sound of evil in the world. And this girl said, and I really relate to that.
Oh my gosh. I just hope that she doesn't have a gas oven. I'm just going to say that right now. Because wow, that's intense. Was this girl's name Virginia Woolf by any chance? Because
yeah, right.
Yeah, wow, that's intense.
On that happy note.
But I just think that this is a big thing for lots of people that so okay, I'm in graduate school right now, and the first time I ever heard the phrase imposter syndrome was my orientation day here at the university, where I had been saying that like blah 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 blah, but like the one thing I was frustrated about was that like, or like a little bit ashamed about, was that my Latin wasn't as good as it needed to be. And like maybe is it
absolute
really,
dork.
is it really good enough to be here?
Loser.
I mean, dude, medievalism, like hashtag dorks are us. Yes, technically that would be dorky sumus, which is cool. But yeah, and then the person I was talking to was like, "Oh, so yeah, that sounds like imposter syndrome," and I was like, "Yes?" Question mark. But ever since then, like I just at the time I thought, "Oh wow, there's a phrase I never heard before, but like that kind of sounds like what I'm experiencing." Sure, yeah. But ever since then, I just find this like everywhere. Like now, this is like a big thing. Like the university holds workshops on like imposter syndrome and this and that, and like,
oh really? That's interesting.
Yeah, and like, I mean, obviously, once I discover that like something is sort of like broadly spoken about, I'm at least going to have to wrestle with thinking that this is dumb.
That is your bias.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. As if it's not yours. As if it's not yours.
It's not. No, mine is the exact opposite. You have the classic hipster bias of if something is popular, you knee jerk toward this is dumb, and I have the exact opposite bias of if everyone says something's dumb, I want to find some deeper meaning in it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's okay, fair. So they're technically speaking the same thing.
We are literally the comedy and
opposite.
tragedy mask of our very niche type of nerdism.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's a fact. Yeah, that's fact. So that's how it goes. Yeah. So I kind of want to explore that basically, like, because I think ultimately that's the question about this so-called like imposter syndrome. It's a problem I think for creatives in general is sort of like asking, am I real or am I a fraud?
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought that would be a fun thing for us to explore.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think we probably sort of glimpsed at that when we were talking about the tortured artist idea. But I like this idea of sort of broadening the scope, because obviously this question isn't something that we just ask of ourselves, right? Am I a real blank? It's also something we ask of other people. Like, are they a real blank? And I mean, this is an arts podcast. We're going to talk mainly about art stuff. Maybe this is even wrong that I would bring this up, because we can't undoodle that Etch-a-Sketch once we start. But I mean, this is even a conversation of like, what is a real Catholic? Am I a real Catholic? Are they real Catholics? You know what I mean? And,
totally. Yeah.
These questions I feel like are maybe the reason why the imposter syndrome conversation is happening so much is because I think we are, as a culture, asking a lot more questions about what makes someone a real whatever they are a lot more often. I mean, even we're doing it with arts on here. And then, I just mentioned the Catholic thing, but like, I mean, so-called cancel culture. And obviously everyone's got an opinion on that and stuff, but just objectively, one of the conversations that happens a lot in there is, oh, this person isn't really an ally. This person isn't really an activist for this thing. They're just performative, or they didn't mean it enough, or, so yeah, questions of my own right to be here and my own justification in a certain identity or movement, questions of other people's are yeah. I mean, when you put it that way, that they all kind of go together, and it's really important.
Yeah. And like, I'm thinking, for instance, the friend of the inventing Anna, the faux New York socialite,
Anna Delvey. Yeah.
Anna Delvey. Thank you. I was for your last name. Her friend, the one who was sort of the major source for like, oh, this is all like, whoa.
Oh yeah. Her frenemy, the one who got screwed in Saudi Arabia or Dubai, wherever they went.
Yeah, exactly. I watched, before the show came out, there was like an interview with her, and she was describing, they're describing this moment. Actually, this might have been an article. But anyway, in any case, she's describing this moment when it was something like they had this big party at a big restaurant or something like that, and like her credit card got rejected. And
right.
The way that she says it, and she says that this was a moment when like her eyes were opened, And but the way that she says it, I thought was really striking, because she says like, "Oh my God, Anna's not for real."
Oh, wow.
And I just like that's a very poignant. I mean, this is a phrase, it's just a kind of casual phrase, but thinking of it, I think, is a very rich thing, that like, she's not real. Like, she's not real, that all of this is not real, but that's a weird idea, because of course it's really happening. This is real money that's being spent. These are people's like real lives that are being upended and stuff like that.
Right.
And
And she's doing the thing she's
really
honestly,
doing it.
Ultimately, this is what the trial comes down to, right? Is like, she's doing the thing she's saying she is, right? She had a plan to produce this money, right? Like, who are you to say that she's not who she says she is? Like, yeah, man, this all gets very... When you suggested "Am I real?" as a topic, shortly before I got to be embarrassingly honest, we are underprepared for this one. When you suggested this topic, I was like, not sure where this is going, but oh shit, this is deep. Actually, this is a pretty wide spectrum of mental health anxieties that can stem up from the various iterations of this, isn't there?
I am familiar with being spectrumy. Yes. Yeah, no, I just think that there's a lot here, like what, because so listen, one of the interesting things about like that claim that like Anna Delvey is not for real, is or one thing that's at the back of it, is this deep like 1980s, 1990s, and even 2000s desire that the ultimate value is authenticity. Like, the ultimate personal value is authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
I would propose, and this isn't the topic that we're really exploring today, but I would propose that the ultimate personal value may have shifted actually away from that now, to a different to a certain modified form, but I think particularly for that maybe 20, 30 years, like the ultimate real personal value was authenticity.
Which I think, I mean, I agree with you on, but I think we should establish a little further as to why you think that and why I do. Maybe it's for the same reason, maybe it's not, because I think most people would assume you were going to say like wealth or self-actualization, or because when I think the 80s and 90s and like the value, I think doing cocaine in an office with shoulder pads, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I think of. But you're right. Like, when you say it, as far as personal values go, and like the thing, especially as we get in the 90s, like the thing that we sort of hold up as the best thing you can be is like the most authentic whatever you are.
Right, exactly. And I think, yeah, and you're right. Like, at some the obsessive value, ultimate valuation of authenticity is always in this like very interesting tension with social goods, of like performed social goods, like Gordon Gekko, greed is good, as you say, like everybody putting on shoulder pads and doing coke, like all that stuff, like that's there. But again, part of the like even there, like part of the kind of Gordon Gekko greed is good thing is saying like, yeah, no, this shouldn't be a performance. This should just be who you are. Like, you shouldn't be ashamed of being obsessed with making money and everything. Like, this isn't some performance. This isn't some like bad version of yourself that you need to like get rid of. Say, this is you, and you accept that you're really you, and like live that.
Yeah, it's not just peeling back the curtain. It's like setting the curtain on fire.
Yeah. And like every 90s like teen special, like every 90s teen show is about kind of like learning to really be who you are, and just be yourself and learn to be beautiful as you are. You can, I mean, again, there are like performative contradictions and tensions here, right? Like every 90s teen movie about like the mousy girl who has bad hair and glasses, learns that she can just really authentically be herself when she like gets a nice haircut and like
Sure.
takes off her glasses and suddenly like her breasts increase like 3 sizes and she like pulls these high heels out of nowhere and
the
there she's just
Grinch's breasts grew 3 sizes that day.
dun 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 dun. That's right. That was also The More You Know. That's just, that was the plot of everything. Was like, I mean, again, you can say that's weird. Doesn't it seem weird and suspicious that like the authentic version of you that you should be looking for is actually kind of a product? Like that's a whole thing. But like, but again, like that's like the cultural messaging of like what do we actually value from like 90s sitcoms, 90s teen shows, even like I'd say dramatically still through the 2000s. You get this very strong idea of just like be yourself, be who you are. I mean, early versions of like home goods wall art, kind of like text decoration art before that was like what every basic white girl had on her wall, were things like be yourself, right, in like nice cursive,
right. And I think there's a popular perception that that's just a celebration of individuality, but I think you're right that individuality is actually just a fruit of that it goes much deeper. It is a celebration of the highest possible good being authenticity. And I'm thinking about this, like even the shows and stuff that were really, because you're right, this is twisting now, but the shows sort of prior and then into the early Trump era, all during the Obama era and everything that were really most popular are like House, Kitchen Nightmares, all these shows where there's a really mean guy. And maybe it's reality shows, maybe it's scripted like House was, but either way, it's like, I mean, even the celebration of the Joker is this, right? That everybody out there is so fake, but this one guy, he goes through and he tells it like it is. And he's an asshole and, a misogynist and, he screams at people in a restaurant and stuff, but he's real.
Yeah, he's real. We say, we
love him. He's a folk hero for that. I mean, Gordon Ramsay shouldn't be a folk hero for the kind of things that those shows have done or the character of House or any of those things, but we ate it up because it was like, oh yeah, he's so real.
Yeah, he's just getting real, and there's this like really strong resistance to any kind of like social performance that's acknowledged as such, at least. Like, you shouldn't have to just like do what your parents did or whatever, like wear uniforms or whatever. Like you just have to like be yourself. You got to be authentic, be true to yourself, find your authentic self and be true to that, and that's what real is. And anything that isn't, anyone who isn't doing that, strictly speaking, isn't real. And that's the problem, right? That's the reality structure that's set up by this absolute value of authenticity. So you said like at the beginning, like is this some sort of like peyote trip, or is it some kind of like existential philosophy thing? Like, well, yes and no. I mean, ultimately no, but you see that this is what a culture chooses to value and teaches people to value is always also a comment about how that culture believes that reality is, like what that culture believes reality is and how that culture believes that we live in it. And like the big demon there, like the big falsehood, like maybe the only kind of sin or vice, is not to be real.
I would go further. So there's a therapist I work with in my practice. She's amazing. She's a close personal friend. You've met her, Sydney, and she makes this point brilliantly. I want to give credit where credit is due, where she talks about how she feels like the biggest sin that you can commit in this culture, and she sort of argues that this is the grounding for sort of what most people would call cancel culture or what have you, is just disappoint what someone believes that you are. So if I believe you are this sort of a person and then you deviate and you become a different sort of a person, then I'm mad at you and I feel personally betrayed by you. So the ultimate evil, if the ultimate virtue is authenticity, the ultimate evil in our culture is disappointing somebody, not being the character that they built up for you. I think I could extrapolate it that far. I don't know if you'd agree with that sentiment.
I think that's probably fair because again, we're talking about like it's the one betrayal is not to be real, right? And so like you can see already the way that there are major grave tensions built into this, right? There are grave tensions built into this because the sin is not to be real. But then also the great sin is to like not be what I thought you were / not be what I want you to be.
Right.
But
right.
if
Which
that's being real, so there's this. Yeah. So one of my very favorite filmmakers of all time is this unspeakable genius named Whit Stillman. And in one of his movies called Barcelona, he has this incredible scene where this guy who's been just swine the entire film is like running away from a problem for like the last time. And he looks over at somebody else with whom he's running away from the problem. And he says, Shakespeare says, to thine own self be true, but what if thine own self is pretty bad? Then to whom shall I be true?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is, of course, genius. This is genius because, again, like he makes this movie in the late 90s, and this is a direct commentary on this kind of like authenticity culture and its tensions, right? To thine own self be true, but if thine own self is pretty bad, actually, then to whom shall I be true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to bring it back to sort of the practical application of these things, we find, the personal question. I'm sitting here as an artist and I'm wondering, am I a real artist? What does it even mean to be a real artist? Is anyone a real artist? And then extrapolating that even further to, questions of religious identity. Am I, or are they real Catholics? What does it mean to be? Does anyone get to decide? These are existential questions, but I think, and I'm curious you're saying you hear this stuff like sort of in the periphery of the campus culture and things like this, but you're also a confessor. I know I hear counseling sessions all the time where people are saying, I probably hear I'm not a real artist the most. I do hear I'm not a real Catholic often, like, oh, I struggle with whatever sin, and therefore, like, and if anybody knew, they would know I was a fraud and not a real Catholic. And I'm not going to say I'm above this, right? We've talked about it perhaps on here, but definitely, privately, I've struggled with, am I a real artist? Am I, when I was younger, right? Am I a real man? Like, not in a gender identity way, but in sort of like a toxic masculinity, like, how do I define my masculinity? Am I bad at it, kind of a thing?
Right.
These are totally things that I've struggled with and do struggle with in my darker moments now. We can get really philosophical about it, but they're really, really practical, important things here, especially for artists and Catholics, which is the whole intersection of this that I think we have to kind of stick to if we're gonna answer this question.
Yeah.
For people.
No, I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's exactly what I want to. So I want to sort of pull it into that big background because at least this is a proposal, so kind of a thesis proposal that I am offering.
You're proposing?
I'm proposing! Finally! I've been living with this thesis for years, and I'm finally making an honest thesis out of it.
Let me call my mom.
It's incredible. Let's get them Instagrams. Anyway, so this is a thesis I'm proposing. So that take it or leave it, but we can it's kind of a framework for this, and that is that this like 80s, 90s, 2000s authenticity culture is at the root of this kind of like contemporary wave of the experience of like imposter syndrome or whatever. And that without trying to be, overly simplistic, but that we do bear these things ourselves. And I, from my own experience, I think that's part of what's going on in these things when I question that myself. Exactly. Like, am I a real man? Am I a real priest? Like, am I a real Catholic? Am I a real like scholar? Am I a real medievalist? Am I a real Latinist? Like all these kinds of things. I think that some of these things are at back of it. And I wanted to start with that point about authenticity because I think we jump too readily, particularly when we're thinking about our own measurable kinds of performance. So, a work of art that you've made that like somebody will either pay for or not, a portfolio that somebody will either praise or blame. For me, like an article that either will be accepted or it won't be accepted, like a translation that either like does what it's supposed to do or it doesn't, etc. Like these things that can be graded. I think that when this question of like, am I real? Am I a real whatever? I think we too readily jump to thinking that this is a qualitative assessment. This is primarily a matter of quality. Like, am I good enough at this?
Sure. Okay, yeah.
And that's an important element, and it's an important element. But I propose that at least as significantly, possibly more significantly, deeper down is this deeper tension in the heart about that arises from this social value of authenticity and its tensions and the difficulty of bearing it.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I had never connected that sort of radical be yourself thing to the imposter syndrome thing. But I think once you make it explicit, it's pretty obvious that like, if I'm told to be myself enough, and then I start to wonder, well, who is myself? And what if I did a bad job at that? And then that becomes the most existential fear possible. I also think, and I'm going to throw this into the mix as an additional ingredient. You the example you just used is they will either review my portfolio positively or they won't. They will either accept the article or they won't. And speaking from like a psychological perspective, I notice I hear an inherent hypothetical future tense to that.
Yeah.
That's really important, I think, when we deconstruct imposter syndrome, because what we're really saying when we say, I'm not a real artist, or am I a real artist, or I'm not a real Catholic, or am I a real Catholic? What we're really saying is, I have an idea of a hypothetical finish line that I'm supposed to get to, that I will be real when I get there. And I'm not there yet. So does that mean I'm not real? So if as an artist, I had my stuff in a gallery, or if I had this kind of work or these kinds of patrons, or as a writer, if I have my stuff in this particular journal, or if I, as a Catholic, if I have this particular family life or look this particular way, then I would sort of fulfill this thing that I say I already am, but it's like pending almost.
Yeah.
I hear this a lot in counseling too, where, cause I am primarily working with Catholics. And so I get sort of all the little sort of Franciscan, anxious, weird kids. And, a lot of them will say, oh, I know I have a vocation to marriage. And I go, oh, great. Who are you dating? And they're like, well, I'm not dating anyone. And I'm like, well, how do you know you have a vocation to marriage? And they're like, well, I just know. And this is the same thing, right? That you have this idea of who you're going to be in the future, but you're not that person yet. And it brings you shame.
Yeah. Right. I think that's really good. Thanks for adding the futurity to it. The element of the future.
You could have just said the element of the future.
Yeah. Well, I did.
Yeah, you got there eventually.
I got there. It was my second try. Please, I'm an academic. This is what we do. We say the dumb thing first, the dumb smart thing first, and then the comprehensible thing second.
It's the Dora the Explorer way of speaking, where she always says like the Spanish word and then immediately follows with the English word.
Yeah.
Vámonos, let's go.
It's exactly like, wow, what an olfactory experience. What a good smell. So listen, there's this amazing book that I think every creative should read. It's by one of my favorite late 20th century novelists. It's a British woman named Penelope Fitzgerald, who I think she died maybe in like 2006, not that long ago. It's called At Freddy's. It's all At Freddy's. I read this with a book group one time who had like pestered me about, they knew that I liked literature and had pestered me about like wanting to read a book with me. And I said like, okay, fine. So like, one of the great things about Penelope Fitzgerald's novels is that they're very brief. This is about 125 pages. And just right, like,
so first you suggested Twilight, Breaking Dawn. And then when they didn't like that, you defaulted back to this one.
Exactly right. Cause I just thought, well, but you just gotta read the first 3,000 pages of, Mormon blueballsing and then like, and then you'll really get Breaking Dawn,
then you'll really get it.
That's right. You'll really connect. Gentle listener, that was not a dig on the Mormons. It was just a comment on Twilight.
Yeah. Just exclusively Twilight.
Just exclusively comment on Twilight. So it's this incredible, so Penelope Fitzgerald is just a stunningly, grippingly incredible writer. And the best part about this book, so like I hadn't read this book. I'd read like most of her other novels, but I hadn't read this one. So I thought this will be fun. I'll discover it together with them. So like we're on level playing field. It'll be great. I adore this book, and I really think that every creative should read it. The best part about the group was that every single other person hated it. Just
which made you love it all
with
the
an
more.
Insane passion. Yeah, with an insane passion. Could not understand. I asked one of the guys at one point, compared it to J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter unfavorably.
Oh damn.
Yeah, that was a powerful moment for me. I embrace that memory when I'm feeling sad sometimes. So, but why do I bring this book up in this context other than just to praise it, which I do like to do, is because, so At Freddy's is, she's this like, Freddy is this like psychopathic, large old lady who runs, a school for child actors. And the book is about child actors in this,
that sounds miserable.
It's insanely good. And a lot of the heart of the book, not the only thing, but a lot of the heart of the book, is circling around and tearing around this question of authenticity and being real and being fake. And if thine own self is bad, to whom shall I be true? And all of these things. So she's sort of raising all of these questions about like, how do I be real? How do I be real? And one of the fascinating things, of course, about acting is that there are two ways that one goes with like a career in acting. One is that you be forever fake, because you kind of know to like how to sound in every scene, like how to sound in every interaction with a real person, that I sort of put on this perpetual persona of being this actor, being this kind of star role of whatever kind. And I am fake forever in this sense, right? But the other way of going is that in learning to do this, I become, as it were, like real forever. That like I enter into the heart of this thing, and I learn to the way that like these words that aren't my words, these poses that aren't my poses, this blocking that is not my motion, that they all become real when I'm living them, and part of the point of the novel is that that the one who's sort of perpetually fake, that these are what you call bad actors in the end. They might be very famous, but ultimately they're bad actors, where the ones who sort of are able to live as perpetually real in this thing, that this is the real pursuit. Like this is the actual art. This is its genius. But note how weirdly both of those are in tension with like the cult of authenticity. because like the beautiful crisis of acting is that this is not authentically you. These are not your words. These are not your actions. You are like, and even the physical practice of it, right? Like learning how to stage fall, learning how to stage kiss, like doing all of these things, right? Like you're learning how to do them in an artificial way. And it's the artifice that ends up being able to make them real. It's the like thing that is quote unquote not authentic that is able to make them actually authentic, like actually real.
Dude.
Yeah. So I think that's a rich thing to kind of look into, that and I think it can be a vein for like a rich vein that maybe one could mine to dig into like where does the social value of authenticity have an unhealthy hold in me, is like where do I believe that I have to invent for myself everything about how to be, basically, in the end. Like that, like one of the claims of Fitzgerald and at Freddy's is that like actually we do have to be taught how to act, including in quote real life. I do actually have to be taught how to be real, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, so I will throw out my personal answer to this, and maybe we can deconstruct a little bit, because I'm totally prepared for it to not be the full answer. But I think so, and this could be taken the wrong way too, but I think that process is a really important component to medicating the imposter syndrome thing. Because, you know, as an artist, if I ever say I'm there, if I ever say like, I'm good, like I've reached the mountaintop, I'm gonna get pretty stagnant in the kind of art that I'm creating. It's going to be bad. Right. And this is in pretty stark contrast with imposter syndrome, which supposes that there is an actual finish line I'm getting to, and that by not being at that finish line, I'm somehow not real. And I have to put the pretense up of maybe already being, if not at the finish line, at least a lot closer than maybe I actually am, you know, by dressing up my resume or my portfolio or whatever else. And the same, I think, is true for Catholicism and religion in general, right? We use this term practicing Catholic. And, you know, there's of course the Stephen Colbert joke of I'm not a practicing Catholic, I've perfected it. Right. But I think that actually goes a long way to understanding why we say practicing Catholic, because there's this idea of it as a process. It's not a stasis that you reach where you're like, I'm here and I'm good now and I'm done. It's the act of I recognize there is a deficit in me, but rather than be disillusioned or desolated by that, as I would be in imposter syndrome, where I say this deficit makes me false or makes me inferior, I'm inspired by that to say, okay, great, this is the way I'm going to grow today. And I'm also grounded by recognizing that even if I happen to become more perfect in that area, there will still be other deficits I have to work on. And so there's like, I think it's too reductive to say that there's a humility that medicates authenticity or cultural authenticity, the way we're talking about it today. But that's in there. But it's not just humility. It's sort of like humility in process. It's like I am actively in development. And it almost seems to me that, and maybe I'm reiterating this too much, but like it almost seems to me that sort of I was lost, but now I'm found and I'm good and I will never sin anymore kind of a thing that is so problematic sometimes in Christianity is that imposter syndrome is sort of a response to that, where it almost believes the people who say that about themselves. It believes the artist who says, I've already made it. It believes the Christian who says, I've already made it, and says, ooh, gosh, I haven't. I don't compare to that person. So therefore, I must not be real enough. And then other people, of course, respond to that with the authenticity thing and just say, no, you're not there yet, but no one could be there. So be really, really authentic about how crappy you are, and sort of revel in your crappiness and your inferiority, but don't grow. And so that's why I'm kind of putting in this middle way, or proposing this middle way, where I'm saying, no, like definitely grow. Don't just accept where you're at and be cool with it, but also don't judge yourself by an imaginary finish line that doesn't exist, because actually the future is a social construct and does not yet exist. Instead, just focus on your process and how you want to be growing a little bit today, and be really honest and open with everybody about how you are actively working towards that, but you're not there yet. The analogy I sort of, and I'll turn this over to you because I'm curious, but the analogy I always sort of use with some of my clients and even in my own art and stuff is this will surprise nobody. The sort of analogy of Disneyland, where, Walt Disney famously says at the opening of the park, Disneyland will never be finished. Right. And we're opening this, but it will never be finished. It will always be this kind of living, constant art process of adding things and taking things away. And I always say to my clients, like, yeah, Disneyland will never be finished, but that doesn't mean it's not open for business already. Like, it is definitely open for business. It is complete, but it's not finished, and we're the same way. Like, I, as an artist, I am not finished. I'm not done growing in all these things, and I hopefully will never be. And I think if I get to a point that I think that I am done, that says something really toxic about where I've ended up in my art process. But I am, quote unquote, good enough to still put my shit out there and like be in a gallery or sell my stuff if I want to, or anything like that. I am complete. I'm just not finished. And the same thing as a Catholic, like, I am working to be a holy person. I am working to adhere myself closer to the heart of God, through morality and prayer and things of this sort. But, am I there yet? No. Does there even exist? No. It's just focusing on my daily process and seeing like, hey, where is God calling me to polish or grow or stretch or adjust, the sculpture a little bit more today. Again, just this idea of I'm complete but not finished, a la Disneyland.
I definitely have thoughts about that. But first, what better way to illustrate questions about authenticity, acting, imposter, than an ad read with somebody else's words? So Creative Things is brought to you by Catholic Creatives. Catholic Creatives is an organization dedicated to igniting a new renaissance of faith through prayer, beauty, and the creative spirit. And to do this, they connect and support and promote artists and innovators and makers and storytellers from across the faith. But as you could expect, it takes a community to bring big ideas like that to life. So we invite you to support Catholic Creatives Patreon. In doing so, you support your glorious podcast hosts.
Support us.
Support us. Yes. And you also contribute to future workshops, summits, resources, outreaches, cool stuff. Basically a lot of different means of supporting Catholic artists throughout the country and abroad, in fact. Unless you are abroad, at which point supporting Catholic artists in America is supporting them abroad, which is cool, which is great. Anyway, become a Patreon member.
You're losing it. Get back to it. You're losing
Focus. I'm sorry. I'm getting too real. Become a Patreon member. Help us make this new renaissance a reality. Go to catholiccreatives.org/support. And also check out the super awesome products from Catholic Creatives, makers and artisan stuff at catholic.store. That's an ending to the domain name. Don't be putting in like catholic.store.com, my friend. This is the brave new world.
Catholic.store.go.com/MySpace.
.net. .gov. So the thing is that, like, what I'm taking from the point that you make is that any human thing is a thing that is always either growing or dying. That's just what a human thing is. A human thing is always either growing or dying. So there is no such thing actually as treading water. Treading water always means that you're getting crappier. Like, that is just the thing that it means. A relationship that is like, quote, on hold is moving farther apart. You know, a skill set that is like treading water is actually getting worse. That there is no such thing as actually like putting a pin in something, and then, you know, being able to have like your beautiful dead butterfly on the board, and say like, I have that now. You know, it's a human thing is always.
I have an object. And I can count how many objects I have. I have one object.
I have object permanence skills and object counting skills and possibly butterfly murdering skills. These are important skills. But a human thing is always a living thing. So it's either it's doing what living things do. Like, a living things are either grow or they die. Like, and that's all that they do. And I just think that's a really important point for this, like for an artist, for people who are trying to do great things that are great human things, is that like we either grow in them, or we're either growing in them today, or we're like dying in them today, and that's just how we do it, and that's okay. As you say, like that's something that's happening. Or should I say, you emphasize like the importance of the process in this, which I think is a good way of thinking about it. And I would also put it as just that we emphasize the presentiality of it. That means the emphasis of the way it's in the present. I did it. See, if you wanted, but to be totally honest, I did that one intentionally.
Yes, you did. I can tell because you used a funny voice.
I used a funny voice. Hey guys,
and that was a social cue to me that you were joking.
By the way, we are going to be higher order narrating the rest of the podcast forever. It's just going to be incredible.
God, can you imagine just how navel gazing it would be? What if we released like that sort of behind the paywall second podcast, but it was just commentaries, live commentary tracks over old podcasts?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, when I recorded this bit, I was having a really interesting day actually, and you can tell that in the shirt that I'm wearing. When you fast forward just 3 seconds, oh my God, that would be amazing.
Yeah, when Jacob said that, I actually wanted to punch him in the face. In fact, true facts, I actually broke my computer monitor that day because I punched it in the face. Yeah, exactly.
I knew someone who did that. I knew someone who.
Oh man, don't do that.
Played the Slender. We had it on video in college. This guy who played the Slender Man video game, and got so scared legitimately when Slender Man jumped out that he straight up like hardcore punched his laptop screen and smashed it. I mean, fully destroyed his monitor.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of respect that. Yeah, that's mad respect to the game designer. Also, maybe you've done your job too well. Yeah, that's amazing.
But the presentiality.
Yeah, it's just that it's actually always here. You know, like you make the important point that like the future doesn't actually exist, which is true. But that like the living human thing that I'm doing and that I am, it's just always here. It's like, it's always now, you know, like I'm frustrated that like I'm behind, like this is not hypothetical. I'm frustrated that I'm not making the progress that I need to on my dissertation, but like, okay, I can like let that weigh on me and then like also waste today not working on my dissertation and then like feel bad about it and then like that spirals, you know, or I can just like start working on it. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
And those are the only options. Like I, you know, those are it. I can either just faff around, or I and continue to feel badly about that, or I can just start working on it. You know, and I get like psychologically there are barriers and things can be tough, and it's not always as easy as like, well, just snap out of it, you know. But when we are talking about like a human thing that we want to do because we want it to be beautiful, we want it to be living, we want it to be alive. Like ultimately it is just like, well, okay, go. Then go.com. Like you just go do it then, or don't.
Yeah. We had a conversation about this. Someone posted about this in actually, you mentioned during the ad read, the Catholic Creatives Facebook group and the private one. And somebody mentioned this there and was sort of asking for people's strategies for coping with imposter syndrome. And this was one of the things I said, there's obviously a lot to Ignatian discernment. I'm hardly an expert on it. And to anyone who is, this is going to sound like a really reductive version, but a lot of Ignatian discernment, that is the discernment process, the discernment of spirits, right? That St. Ignatius puts down is determining between what he calls consolations and desolations, what we might reductively in psychology refer to as like helpful and effective thoughts versus unhelpful and ineffective thoughts. And there's a whole spiritual component to this. Again, I'm being reductive for the sake of brevity, but one of the primary ways you judge whether something is a consolation or a desolation is by looking at the fruits of it. And if you have this thought and it's leading you to isolate, if it's leading you to sin, if it's leading you to misery, it is probably not from God, right? It's probably not a godly thought. It is probably a desolation. That is something from the evil one meant to desolate you. And vice versa, if that thought leads you to greater virtue, greater closeness with other people, greater fulfillment, any of these kinds of things. I mean, again, speaking flippantly, there's a good chance that is from God, that it's a consolation, right? And I proposed this as sort of one answer to the imposter syndrome thing, which is like, if you're saying I'm not a good enough artist or a good enough Catholic, and again, I reject the enoughness of anything, but if you find yourself saying that, and it's moving you to work harder on that thing, and inspiring you to grow in that way, you might have some flawed concepts about things like what it means to be an artist or what it means to be a Catholic or what it means to be enough. But ultimately there's good fruit in there and God's going to use that. But as you're saying, Father Gabriel, like if it leads you to isolate and say, I'm not a real artist, so therefore I'm not going to try. I'm not a real Catholic, so therefore I'm going to stop going to church. Like that is obviously a desolation and you need to tune that shit out.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly right. And like, maybe you need to get to the bottom of it. Maybe you just need to like stop paying attention to it. And that's part of how you get to the bottom of it, That's right. Yeah. So just like kind of where we've been. So where we've been heretofore, and say like, okay, so in reason for making this proposal about the danger of, calling attention to the role of this cultural value of authenticity in the individual experience. One thing about that is that it says that there is some hypothetical, magical, perfect version of me that I have to go find, and that's the only way that I can live. Another thing about that's a presupposition is that is in fact a static reality. That in fact it's always been perfect. There's an interesting kind of pessimistic optimism here. That the me, that's the perfect me I need to be authentic to, is and has always been perfect. And I'm only having problems because I'm not my perfect me. So it's very pessimistic actually, but it's also very encouraging and optimistic.
Right.
Yeah,
it's wrapped in very pretty paper, but it's actually
really pretty dark,
sad
in fact.
Underneath it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then on top of that, so we raise those questions. And then on top of that, as artists, as creatives of various kinds, raising the flag that actually one of the problems of the cult of authenticity is that it precludes this basic human truth that I actually have to learn how to be who I am. I actually have to learn how to do everything that I want to do, like literally everything that I want to do. So
elaborate on this, because I've actually always struggled with this point when you make it. and I'm being very honest here because I don't know what your answer is, and I'm not sure if I'm going to agree with it or not. But on the one hand, you say there isn't this ideal self floating out there in the ether somewhere that I am racing to go be, that I am trying to assimilate myself into, and that my inability to do so far is the source of all my problems. On the one hand, you're rejecting that idea, and I can get behind that. But on the other hand, you're saying I have to become who I am. And this is very much a reflection of something Pope St. John Paul II says, when he says, families become what you are.
Yeah.
Right. And there is this idea of my amness, and I am moving into a process of this. There is, some people will extrapolate that to say, like, you know, God designed you a certain way, and you know, you need to be consistent with this, and you need to grow to be that person. And there are all kinds of different ways to extrapolate that, but you yourself in the same breath are rejecting one and holding on to the other. And I don't know that I have ever been able to consider a nuanced difference between those two things. So I would love for you to speak to that.
Yeah, I think the point about that you made about the reality of being in process, being as becoming, right? Being as growing into a thing, and that like any real human thing is a thing that is either living or it's dying. It's either growing or it's shrinking. That this is how I am. that I am who I am. I am, excuse me, what I am, whether I want to be what I am or not. It's just simply, there's just me. There's nothing else, you know, there's just me. Even if it would be a really comforting myth, it would be really comforting if there were some sort of like false prison that like a real me was hiding in that I just need to be broken out of, you know? And like, wouldn't that be amazing?
Or alternatively, a real me waiting at the end of a finish line somewhere, that if I can just race hard enough, I'll meet them.
Yeah. So it's either spatially located within or spatially imagined as being without, you know? But it's one way or the other, you know? Like it would be, interestingly, this is one thing that attracts St. Augustine in his big book, the Confessions, when he's talking about his own history, that he falls in love for a while with this very weird sort of marginal ex-Christian group called the Manichees. Their teaching doesn't really matter for us, for our purposes, but
they well, I mean, I will say very quickly, they believed that Christ was not totally fully God and fully manatee. That was
he was fully mostly actually they worship manatees mostly.
Christ ate close to 10 kilos of lettuce every day. It was a weird fringe group, the manatees.
Yeah. Could get caught in propellers. It was really sad, actually.
Really awful.
Right. So
I would just want like a manatee crucifix with like propellers and the stigmata.
No! Sad little kids.
I'm going to hire someone to make that for me and hang it blasphemously on the wall. It's not sacrilege if it's to make you smile.
That's how could it possibly be? So one thing that he's attracted to about them originally is that they actually propose this kind of idea that like ultimately there's a real you hiding that in fact is being kept prisoner and just needs to be set free. They believe it's being kept prisoner by the evil prison of the body. They think the body is evil, matter is evil. They think that an evil material god keeps you prisoner. And at first he thinks this is really cool because like then like I look back at my life and I see my problems and I see like all these bad things that happened when I did these things and like all this stuff about myself that I don't like. And like suddenly it's all like ollie oxen free, like wipe off the chalkboard because like none of that's my fault. It's because like this evil god has trapped me in a body and the real me is hiding inside it, you know? And so for a while he liked that. Like that was the thing that attracted him. But then he writes that after a few years of living as a member of this group, that became the thing that actually one of the major things that actually pushed him away was realizing that this is a totally static vision of what it means to be a person. Like the real, perfect, authentic, wonderful me just is there, either inside, spatially imagined, or at the far end, spatially imagined. And that's it. It's just what it is. It can't grow, can't shrink. It just is what it is because it has to already be perfect, right? And like this is where you could say like Augustine, maybe for the first time explicitly, like in the Latin West, like identifies the crisis of authenticity and rejects it. Like it rejects it as a prison that stops the human being from growing and being alive. And I bring that up in this context because I say like, well, how can I reject that, but then also say like, Christian, become who you are? Mm-hmm. It's because that is the only way to be a Christian, is to become who I am. That is the only way to be an artist, is to become who you are, is to become an artist. Like the only way to be these things is to become them. That like being is becoming here. There is no stasis where I just hold it and it is what it is. And now it's settled and now it's done.
So it's a way of saying be in that constant state of becoming.
Yeah, that this is literally the only way to be these things. It's literally the only way to be a Christian, is to be being brought into the heart of Jesus Christ ever more closely. Otherwise, I'm being brought out farther away. The only way to
makes
be
sense
an artist is to practice art.
Right, which makes sense why JP2, it makes sense why JP2 would say it in the context that he is, right? Because he's not saying there is some ideal family out there at the end of a finish line or inside somewhere that you have to adhere to and assimilate to. He's saying, don't, as he often says, don't settle for the mediocrity of I already am what I am, that stasis. Also, don't fall into the trap of holding yourself up to a non-existent future standard. Instead, just exist in that place of constant becoming. Recognize that family life is something that you don't just take for granted. It's something that you actively keep moving forward on together. So that's what I'm extrapolating anyway, based on what you're saying. But that makes sense if that is what he's saying.
Yeah, St. Francis says something very similar when he's
of Assisi
St. Francis of Assisi. Yeah, when he's about to die. His life is sort of famously radical. He's like really sort of wild.
Totally rad.
Ted's rad, brat. But when he's sort of about to die, he says to the brethren around him, like, let us begin, brothers. Let us begin to live our life. Because what we have done up till now counts for little or nothing. And you could say like, wow, like you just like harsh my vibes, bro. Cause like, like St. Francis is so nice and he like loves animals and stuff. But like, no, but this is the whole point. It's like, let us begin, like if I say like, oh yeah, look at all this awesome stuff I've done. Or like, look, I've been living this life forever. And like, I kind of like, if I in any way allow myself to give into this temptation of like I've kind of locked this down, I'm kind of rocking it, it ceases to be a human thing, right? It ceases to be a human thing because it just no human thing is static. A human thing is only ever a thing in becoming. So it's either I've said in fact I've treating it no longer as a human thing, and what's actually happening is it's dying. He says
totally.
Like at the end of his life, he's like, let us begin. Like now I'm ready to begin. Not in this weird sort of like, once I cross that pearly gates, but no, just like he's going to begin that minute, to try to be a Christian, to try to do this great thing, that he's doing.
Yeah. There is no starting line other than right at this moment. Yeah. And there is no finish, because that's another part of this we haven't even talked about. We keep talking about the finish line, but so much of the imposter syndrome is imagining that you are running some kind of race and that there are people that are further ahead than you because you started late or you started at the wrong place.
Totally.
And I like this idea. Like, I mean, it's really charmingly sort of new age, right? In sort of like, I know how much you hate Rent, so I bring this up specifically to bother you, but like this sort of no day but today, that kind of thing. Like there is an element of this to that or of that to this, where it's like, yeah, there isn't actually a starting point. There isn't actually a past, right? There isn't actually a future. These are concepts. There is right now, and there is no starting point other than where I'm at right now, and there's no finish line. There's just constantly moving forward and, being in a constant state of becoming.
Yeah. I mean, I am of course, as a child of the 80s and 90s, I naturally learned everything that I know about the universe from those great sages, Noel and Liam Gallagher, the brothers of Oasis, which literally nobody has ever thought about since Y2K. I don't think they really survived the transition to the new millennium. But they had an album called Be Here Now, and it was so profound because you just gotta like be here now. And of course, like, I despise in any way identifying with this kind of thing, but like that ultimately, yeah. I mean, like, you do actually have to you do actually have to be here now is the thing. But with that, there's another angle on this that I want to point to, which is really connected with
a whole other angle. I thought you were starting to wrap up. I legit thought you were winding it down with that way you posed
winding
that.
down, but like, it's
I thought you were going to be like, after the Francis thing, I legit thought you were going to be like, so gentle listener, let us begin to go and create cool things. But you didn't do that.
I didn't do that. Because I have another point that I want to make, which is that I think another really, really important, because all that we've been saying, the steps that we've been saying, I think do hold important, like, logical and philosophical and psychological water. And as ways of understanding, like, being a creative, being a human being, like being a living thing who is in becoming. But there is one last thing I think that is a really helpful ingredient for, like, you say, like, okay, but here I am, and I'm want to be an academic, or I want to be an artist or whatever, and I am still struggling with imposter syndrome. So, like, what do I do with it? Here's one last virtue, one last way of thinking about the human thing that I want to propose as a real antidote to imposter syndrome stuff, to this question of, like, am I real? And that's, we talked about this once a long time ago, and I just want to talk about it a little bit more in this context. And that's this clunky word, magnanimity. This word that just means great souledness, like having a great soul. And let me just say really briefly what that is and why I think it's related to the subject. So, it actually does concern, like, how we earn, how we receive, like, honor. And honor is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a good thing. It's actually one of the highest goods that the human being can desire. We can desire honors for all kinds of wrong reasons. We can pursue them for all kinds of wrong reasons and all kinds of wrong ways. But honor in itself is a real human good. Magnanimity concerns the way in which we desire honor and the way in which we pursue it. And ultimately, it's a freedom to want greatness. It's a freedom to want things that are great. And it's interesting because, properly speaking, in the person, like, where is it located, so to speak?
In the big toe.
Besides being in the big toe, it's in the way in which I face difficulties, actually. So there's this, like our emotions, our passions, that, like, face things that are difficult. It directly concerns, like, facing things that are difficult with hope that some good can come out of this. That, like, this is difficult, but I can persevere and continue and struggle through it, and that I can have confidence that I will attain this great thing in doing this thing that I'm doing. I think that magnanimity, this greatness of soul, this desire for great things, is a really critically important part of, like, directly attacking the roots that lead to these feelings we call imposter syndrome. Because actually, I suspect part of the problem of imposter syndrome is not that I want pie in the sky stuff that I can't actually have. It's that I actually want something that's too small. You know, I actually want like a reputation without having earned it. I actually want to just find myself to be this perfect version of myself without having done all the stuff that like gets me there. I actually want to just like get discovered on TikTok without like just that, you know, just like these things that just happen to me, you know. I
don't want to do it. I want to have done it.
I want to have it. Yeah. Those are very small desires. I think we actually need to have the freedom to desire greatness, to desire things that are great. That like, I want the thing that I'm working. I want to have the freedom in my own heart to desire that the thing that I'm actually working on could be great. That doesn't mean to be imprisoned by sort of like, oh my gosh, it's not this isn't Michelangelo's Pietà, so it's garbage, and like I'm in a complete panic about that. But know that like I actually want to be so present to this thing that I'm working on, this creative project, this piece of art, this article, that I want it to be great, and I want to labor for its greatness, and I want not to be put off by the arduousness of the labor. I want not just to give up for in despair and embrace like mere kind of mediocrity,
or aping someone else's version of greatness.
Yeah, or just doing nothing, lying, waiting to be discovered, either by someone else or by myself. You know, like
right, yeah.
I think we actually need the freedom to desire great things, to desire that the things that we do be great, and to work for them to be great, to learn the skills that we need, to do the things that we need to make them actually be great. And like, you know, magnanimity, this is what's interesting about it, is that it can regard really, really big things, you know, like a general who's fighting in an army or whatever, or like, you know, the country is at stake. It can regard really, really big things, and you can say like, that's magnanimity, like that's like black tar magnanimity. It's the pure deal. But then there's this like really critically important magnanimity that's in everything that we do. That interestingly, it's this desire for greatness, this like willingness to fight for and to work for and to fight to have hope in difficult times, for greatness in things that themselves are quite small. Basically, it's
it almost sounds like you're saying like doing it for the love of it. Whatever the thing is that you're doing, whatever the it is, doing it for not for where it's going to get you, not not performatively to keep up with the Joneses or the Kardashians, but just to do it for the love of it.
I think that can be related? An important element. I think yes, okay. I think that can be an important element. I would just give a little bit of a qualification because, like, for example, I am not good at working out. I am not like a gym bro, but I do go to the gym. And like, I will use the elliptical because it is the form of exercise that you can most easily read novels while you are doing. And that is the only reason that I'm exercising is to read novels. And I have just had to accept this about myself, that like, I actually love this. I actually love it. I really do love it. I will not tolerate working the elliptical at like a very slightly higher than is comfortable level of like resistance or exercise, because I actually just have no interest in like sweating that much. Like I want like a basic level of exercise so that I can read my novels and like not die when I'm like sitting reading books for 20 hours a day. And that I am legitimately doing it for the love of the thing, but I am also like actively choosing to refuse to like embrace it being any harder than it is. And so just say like, I have for my own reasons, like legitimately chosen to settle into a kind of crapitude with like how I exercise, you know, like this could become more of a thing. I could build up better muscles. I could probably be healthier, but I just don't want to. because like at the level of me doing it for the love of it, like I don't need to.
Well, but what's the it that you're doing? Like, I think you're thinking really narrowly about, and almost in a platonic ideal kind of a sense about what working out is. Like if the point, like there are some people,
roids, man, roids.
Well, but there are some people who are working out for the love of working out. And so for them, getting the gains and all those kinds of things would be doing it for the love of it. But that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it to be a little active while you're engaging your creative imagination. And like, that's the thing that you're doing for the love of it. So you're doing that. Right. So I think that is a perfect example of the magnanimity thing. You don't feel any need to keep up with someone else's thing. You're doing this for the love of it because it's meaningful to you and you're going to do it the most you can.
Okay, I accept that. I accept that
that affirmation of myself.
It is, yeah, exactly. I mean, it is close every time I see these exercise bros or these like intense chicos just like pouring sweat, like the smoke is pouring off of their elliptical machine next to me. I just would be like, girl, calm down. Like,
I saw this guy once. I went to the gym once, and this guy was just, I mean, this guy was just stripped down to sinew. I mean, this guy was just muscular tissue. And he walks into the changing room, the locker room, and he's just gagging and just breathing so hard. And then he just rips off his shorts, and just the largest manhood I've ever seen just like swings around and legit nearly hits me in the face. And I was like, what species are you? What is this that I'm looking at being traumatized
What would
by?
you say you are? That's like this is not how I use the elliptical.
No. But that's because you're doing it for the love of it, and the it that you love is ultimately being on the elliptical and reading the novel. Yeah,
you're probably right. I think what's important about this magnanimity thing, and the reason why it's like connected to all this is, and maybe you're right to say that another way of looking at this angle, another angle from which to look at this question is this question of love and the doing something as a pursuit of love, and doing something sort of in love and out of love, is that this actually gives you the freedom to like be mediocre. It gives you the freedom to like not already be quote unquote a pro, to not already be perfect, to like, because in the little thing that I have present to me that I can do, or just whatever size thing I have present to me that I'm actually working on, like I can have the freedom to desire that it be great and to labor that it be great. And maybe it will turn out to be great. Maybe it will not turn out to be great, but like I have that freedom in like literally everything I do, no matter how big or how small it is. And that's just always present to me. Like that's what great souledness means. That's what magnanimity means, is that like my heart is always free to desire that the thing that I'm doing be great and to labor so that it could become so. It might end up being kind of crappy, kind of mediocre, and that's all right. But like the freedom of the heart is to desire that even the smallest thing that I do be great.
And that would be another perfect place to end this episode, except that I have a question that I can, and I'm sort of imagining some of my clients listening to this episode as some of them do. And if you are right now, you should stop, because this is a terrible podcast and you need to go do the thing I assigned you to do in session rather than listen to this terrible, terrible podcast. But I'm imagining some of my clients who maybe deal with scrupulosity, or who are just, who aren't dealing with scrupulosity, but are maybe just more traditionally minded. And they're in my head anyway, they're screaming like, but what about just things that are wrong? And what I mean by that is, I sort of started this episode throwing out, there are people who say, am I a real Catholic, or are those people real Catholics? And without getting into, because I think any group philosophically, politically, whatever has these people, but there are definitely people who say, like, how dare you call out my particular form of immorality my particular unique sin. You can't say I'm not a Catholic for doing this, and I'm not changing it, right? I'm a real Catholic because I say I am. I'm a, and you could extrapolate that into the arts thing again. I am not a dancer, but who are you to say I'm not a dancer? So I could just say I'm a dancer, and I could just like wiggle, and then I'm a dancer. You know what I mean? So everything you've said, I totally agree with, but the magnanimity thing of doing things for the love of them and not judging ourselves by the imaginary and fabricated standard of tomorrow or yesterday, not believing in some mythological ideal self that I have to unlock, with a certain number of Zelda treasure chests, right? Like, I'm totally tracking with all of that, but it almost feels like we're making a backdoor argument for, so if you just say, hey, I can be, I can be a Catholic while going out and like murdering puppies. Who are you to say that I am not? I can be a dancer without actually like dancing. Who are you to say that I'm not? And I'm wondering how we juxtapose everything we're saying against that.
Yeah, that to me, that's why the at Freddy's point is so important, is that actually in the end, I have to learn how to be what I am. Like, I can't just invent it for myself. I actually have to learn these things. And in the process of learning, like, is a process of being shaped from the outside. So like, I cannot just decide the principles by which one is a dancer. I can't just invent that. Like, I actually have to be taught. See, like, the other side of learning, right, is that I have to be taught. Like, if this involves social, like, real human relations, that like the best and most beautiful living human things are handed down from person to person, and I actually have to be shaped by like the presence of another person, right? Like, the sovereign, authentic me is actually, in fact, only able to be free by being formed by others. So in fact, like, if I want to be a good actor, I cannot just decide for myself, like, what it means to be a good actor. I actually have to learn to act well. And the funny thing about that is that's going to be a matter of internalizing a lot of things that are not authentic, that I did not invent, that are not, quote, who I am, that actually, if I really embrace them and really try to do them, pursue them with a lot of greatness, will really give me the freedom to live well.
Fascinating. Okay, right? I see what you're saying. Because I wasn't actually sure even now, until right now, where you go. We're trying to go with the Freddy's thing, but this is now unfolding for me. So I'm going to say it in my own words so I can try to get it. But like, what you are essentially saying is that by buying into the sort of Anna Delvey, I am this in the future, and therefore I have to pretend to be this, or otherwise feel ashamed that I'm not this yet. That if you accept doing it for the love of it right now, and the nowness and all these kinds of things, that actually frees you up to then start growing authentically, to start growing for real, because you're not trying to keep up with something that's fake.
Yeah. And in that, I am actually having to learn a lot of objective skills that like I'm learning from other people, like if I want to be a sculptor, I have to like a ton of effort learning like how to use these tools and how to work with rocks and like what kind of rocks are, but all this just, right. These are objective things and I have to learn them. Right.
Right. But I'm only free to do that if I don't feel like I'm running a race towards a true self somewhere.
Yeah.
Because then I should already know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which brings us back to kind of, and I don't mean to pick on the poor thing, she's been through enough, but like brings us back to the stereotypical Anna Delvey example, right? That what ultimately prevented her from becoming the art gallery, nightclub owning ingenue that she wanted to be was pretending that she already was.
Right. Right. In the end, not actually desiring real greatness, like the real greatness that produces these things as side effects because of the actually arduous goods that it is pursuing with hope, that confident that it will have good results, actually laboring to learn the hard things that I actually have to do in order to make those possible, to actually make a living thing that creates and makes life. And as a consequence, sometimes if you want the kinds of things like a socialite might want, also as a consequence produces all of these other things, or can produce all these other things.
I mean, not to blow smoke up our own asses, but I think this podcast is sort of a small version of that, right? Where I've talked before. I think we talked about this in our interview with Matt Meeks from Catholic Creatives, where we talked about how there have been plenty of times in my career where I've said, "Oh, I'm going to do this, and this will be the thing that takes off and makes me the real whatever." Whatever the real was that I was trying to be at that time. And this wasn't that, this podcast. This was just us saying, I would really love to have an excuse to talk to you about our incredibly niche bullshit every week. And this would be a way to justify that with our respective versions of workaholism. And, we are just doing this for the love of it. And wouldn't you know, as a byproduct, as a fruit, as a secondary gain, this is the first thing that works out, where all those other things I was launching to work out don't, and I was trying to kind of be authentically myself with this ideal self with those things. This I'm comfortable with now. I'm comfortable with just doing it for the love of it. I'm comfortable just being in a state of becoming with this thing, saying, how can we just polish this a little more? How can we make this a little better? What can we do to become better interviewers? What can we do to have more interesting topics, but not doing it to achieve some long-term goal, not doing it because, and then that will bring in this audience, or, then, we'll trend or whatever else, but just literally doing it because we love it right now here.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think that's right. That's what we're hoping for,
This is the ultimate upshot of every podcast, is that we're perfect at this. And you guys just need to do whatever we tell you to do, because we are already there. We're already at the end of that.
We already nailed it. Guys, discover in yourselves the you who I am. So listen, guys. Am I real? Are you real? Maybe. You could be. Maybe you are. But you are. You could be. If you go forth and create cool things. Shameless.
So dumb.
You've been listening to Created Things, a podcast of Catholic Creatives, hosted by Father Gabriel Torretta OP and Jacob Flores Popchek, produced by Jessica Flores Popchek and Kyle Meineke. To find out more about how you can support the podcast and other ventures for artists, visit catholiccreatives.org/support.